Warm welcome, Shane and Jill. Um, I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment, but the reason that we're doing this little session for the webinar is unfortunately you two are really, really busy and you're not going to be able to join us on Tuesday. So we thought we'd have a conversation because you are two of the key people as part of the project team on Housing Without Delay. You are very expert housing occupational therapists, but you also for the project bring for us that expertise in the fact that Shane, you're in Northern Ireland, Jill, you're in Scotland. So what I want to do over the next 15 minutes after you've introduced yourself is to really have a conversation around how things are for you in Northern Ireland and Scotland, and hopefully what you're going to get out of this project for your countries. So before I go into the questions, do you just both want to introduce yourselves just so that the audience can get a feel for who you are, how you're going to be supporting the project, and your background? So if we start with you, Shane.
Yeah, Rachel, how you doing? Thanks a million. Yeah, my name's Shane Elliott. I'm the head of housing and health in Northern Ireland. I am an occupational therapist by background, and my post currently, I'm jointly employed by the Department of Health and the Housing Executive, who are the Strategic Housing Authority in Northern Ireland. So my job is primarily looking at policy, strategy, delivery, looking at how health and social care trusts and the housing executive and the associations interface and collaborate and work together in terms of delivering effective solutions for people with disabilities. So yeah, but my background is occupational therapy. I was head of occupational therapy services for a number of years across a number of programs of care, and previously worked as a clinical specialist OT in housing. So I've been involved in housing for over 30 years now. And we are really entering challenging times. So I think this work is coming at a really, really good time for the profession.
Brilliant. Jill, over to you. Do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Rachel, and delighted to be here. Sorry, I can't be there in person. So I'm Jill Pritchard. I'm an occupational therapist. I've been around a very long time as an OT. Don't want to admit how long, but I've always tended to work at the interface of social care and housing. But I've had a variety of other managerial roles and different opportunities over the years, including now being self-employed for about, I think it's 11 years now. And I've had incredible opportunities across Scotland around adaptations in housing and the kind of integration of health and social care and trying to get housing at that table. I've been involved in the housing association movement for a long time, and I'm currently chair of Horizon Housing Association, which is part of a much bigger Link group, which is really the biggest developer in Scotland at the moment in the social housing sector. So that the combination of my roles over the years has given me a huge opportunity actually to kind of be quite active at national level and generally be a thorn in the side of Scottish Government to try and get them to improve the delivery of services across accessible housing and adaptations generally. So yeah, very, very delighted to be involved in this work and think it's going to be hugely impactful for my occupational therapy colleagues across Scotland. I'm still in touch with a very wide network of OTs, so look forward to hearing from them and hope some of them are in the audience today.
Yeah, and it's really great to have you both involved in the project. As you know, I've got 3 or 4 questions for us to have a chat about. So the first question is, I think it's going to be because we will have a mixed audience of people from England, hopefully Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. I think what it would be really useful to do for us to start with is, can you paint us a little bit of a picture of what the current landscape looks like for housing OTs in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and how you think it kind of compares to England? So what you think the what we might have in common, what the differences might be. So Shane, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, well, I think the, the word I would use is challenging in terms of the landscape, Rachel. Um, we're very different in Northern Ireland. We don't have housing OTs as such in Northern Ireland. We do have an integrated health and social care system, so our OTs tend to be employed within the health system. And whilst we interface and collaborate very closely with our housing colleagues, we're not embedded within. So it's a very, very different model that we have. And that brings its own challenges. It's got its positives in terms of our integration with health and social care, but we're not as immersed in housing as your colleagues in England might be. So that can create, there's a fundamental, sometimes I think, lack of understanding in terms of what we do as a profession, which I think this document and this project will certainly help to inform that. But the challenges are many. You know, we have workforce issues. There's significant waiting times for occupational therapy assessment. There's significant waiting times for adaptation provision. There's a serious lack of accessible housing stock. So we have people waiting far, far too long on effective housing solutions. But and we probably have the word crisis is bandied around too lightly sometimes, but we've a bit of a crisis in our health system, but we also have a crisis in our housing system. So there's a wee bit of a perfect storm happening at the moment. And that's why I think the role of occupational therapy and what we can bring to the party in terms of what we can deliver could be, there may be opportunities within that. An old boss of mine used to say, never waste a good crisis. And I think there are opportunities with what the strategic direction to get our voice heard, to get in there and actually really, really promote what the profession can do.
Okay, thanks, Shane. What about yourself? What does it look like in Scotland, Jill?
Well, I suppose we're maybe a bit of a hybrid in between England and Northern Ireland from the sounds of things. So we have quite a number of housing occupational therapists in specialist housing roles across Scotland. They can all be very different in terms of the roles that they actually carry out. And then we have some of them are employed directly by housing, by local authorities, and some are paid for by social work and sit in housing. There's all sorts of combinations, but they're not always used to their full capacity in terms of that kind of whole system of housing, because I believe that occupational therapists can be involved in every aspect. Hopefully we can come back to that a bit later in the conversation. I think one of our challenges is spreading good practice, because we've got lots of pockets of really good examples of how it can work to best effect, but we're really not good at sharing that out. In terms of the kind of broader landscape, we have similar workforce issues. We have challenges with, and we have lots of challenges, but with waiting times for occupational therapy assessment and also for rehousing. Several local authorities in Scotland have declared a housing emergency, and indeed Scottish Government declared a housing emergency. So there's huge, just like Shane says, a perfect storm, a real burning platform indeed, and a really excellent time for occupational therapists to absolutely shine in this kind of space, you know.
So the second question I've got is, obviously we've got a new government in England in terms of the policy driver. There is a real sense that we're moving from kind of that sickness to prevention. In England, we saw an extra £86 million go into the DFG pot of money for this financial year. So there's a lot in terms of how housing adaptation is going to contribute to that government policy drive around sickness to prevention. Can you just say a little bit around in Northern Ireland and Scotland what the kind of current, I mean, you have alluded to this a little bit in your previous answer, but what the current government drivers are around housing, and therefore what are the opportunities that we've got as occupational therapists? Jill, do you want to start with that one?
So yeah, we've got a number of things going on around the whole kind of early intervention and preventative agenda. Obviously, Neil Gray, the newish health minister, is quite clear about the shift to. I don't want to get political, but it's like he's invented the shift to early intervention and prevention, when as OTs we've been do that for a long time. So yeah, that is a big policy driver, and I'm not sure that a lot of the people who are in positions of power actually know what that means on the ground. So again, I think occupational therapy, we're perfectly positioned between housing, health, social care, and indeed the wider third sector and public health to really pick up on that. So there's that. We've got the National Care Service, which was a recommendation after the Feely report in 2021, which is still rumbling around, and really again is kind of there's a lack of direction with that, but again an opportunity for a much more kind of person-centered, outcome-focused approach to the delivery social care services more generally. So we have that. And then we have, we've got the housing emergencies, and we have over 40,000 people on waiting lists in Scotland for rehousing on the grounds of ill health and disability. And again, from my experience of looking at people, I think this is a huge opportunity for OTs to actually review waiting lists for people who've been waiting for years and years and years, apparently in priority situations for a different house. I mean, what are they doing in the meantime? Do you know? So I think there's a lot of benefits in getting OTs in and about that. And that might be one of the aspects we could bring out in this document going forward. So just very briefly, the last thing is the Housing to 2040, which is the vision for housing in Scotland, currently articulated for over a number of years. And it's all basically been kind of stalled because of other priorities. So there's a real frustration there, because a lot of the things that are in Housing to 2040 around an accessible housing standard, tenure neutral, reviewing adaptations, and a redesign of our a design standard for social housing, for wheelchair and accessible housing, they've all been stalled, and it's so frustrating. And again, if we could just accelerate some of that by demonstrating the impact that these changes could make, that would be really helpful.
I mean, I think what we're only a few months into the project, but I've spoken to a number of housing OTs or OTs working in social care that are working alongside housing. And it's that real preventative stuff, but not the reactive preventative stuff where we're going in and doing an adaptation after somebody's had a fall and to prevent that. But it's, the kind of, housing OTs getting involved in, designing new builds. So that actually we're doing that kind of public health prevention, but actually preventing those problems developing. And it is really exciting what we can do.
Yeah. Can I just come back in just very briefly, Rachel? Because I think that's again where in asset management, in broader asset management, around cyclical maintenance, refurbishment programs, I've been involved in these things in the past, and OTs can make huge impacts in that early intervention space there.
Yeah, and they are doing, Jill. I think one of the things I know what we've talked about as a project group is we don't want to be developing anything new because we've already got pressures on workforce, but it's about saying, look, this is the really good practice that is already happening out there to help you with the problems that you've got as a housing manager, managing all that stock. Get an OT in and they will help support you in terms of that asset management of your properties. Shane, what about Northern Ireland then?
It's not significantly different to what Jill has just described, Rachel. The policy direction is very much about that preventative and that early preventative agenda. The Department of Health have just released a reset plan, which is all very much focused on a neighbourhood model of care. Care being provided embedded in communities and all of that. And I suppose I get frustrated that they do talk about it like they've just invented it, as Jill has described, but this has been bandied around for the last 20, 30 years, going back in Northern Ireland as far back as the 90s. I remember community care initiatives and policy direction at that point. So it hasn't changed significantly. Alongside that, we also have the Department for Communities who oversee housing. There's a housing supply strategy underway at the moment, and part of that work is looking at how we allocate what they're referring to as specialist housing. So how we allocate our accessible homes, how we score and point and prioritize people who have a need for that type of home. And I think occupational therapists have a key role to play in allocation of properties, which we're not as embedded in as we should be and could be, in terms of helping to inform and make sure that the right properties are allocated to the people with the right need. And at the moment, there's a disconnect there. So we could be getting involved in properties that have been allocated totally inappropriately, and then we're going in to carry out major adaptations to make them right. So I think if we get OTs right up at the front end, at the point of assessment, the point of allocation, and matching the right people, well, then that's where we could make significant gains in Northern Ireland, I believe. But at the moment, we're not there yet because that disconnect exists. So that would align, the strategies about neighbourhood care and looking at allocating the right property. So if we can get those two departments, and that's part of my job, is to try to bring the departments together in terms of making sure that we align in terms of what our policy and strategic direction is. And I think OT could be key to that, which is why, again, I say this project is probably very timely at elevating the role of OT and actually educating our stakeholders, our strategic decision makers around what OT can bring to the party.
So, going on to my third question. So before we play this recording, we'll have gone through the 3 toolkits, or basically 3 resources that we're developing as part of Housing Without Delay. So we're going to have a strategic toolkit resource, that influencing document in terms of those that are involved at that strategic policy level. We've got an operational resource toolkit that will support those that are going to have to do this and how do they do it. And then obviously we've got the resource for frontline staff, so occupational therapists that are at the front line. So how do you see those 3 toolkits being useful for you using it in Northern Ireland? And for yourself, Jill, in Scotland? Again, we have touched on this a little bit, but what are your thoughts around how you think those 3 toolkits will be useful in Scotland and Northern Ireland? Shane, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, probably in the job that I'm in at the moment, Rachel, I would say that the strategic element will be the one that I will set most of my store in, if I'm being honest, because I think we have a real opportunity because of the significant reform that's going on in Northern Ireland. There's a financial crisis, let's be blunt about it, and that has resulted in significant reform. So in terms of that, we need to educate and inform our strategic decision makers around the role and function of occupational therapy related to housing, because that is not understood at all. And I would imagine even at local organisation level, certainly within our health and social care trusts, even within medical professions, it is not understood what we do as a profession in relation to this. So the strategic target our strategic decision makers, put it out there. This is what we can do. This is how we will do it. And this is a difference that we will make in doing it. And then looking operationally closer to ground and organizational level, something similar. We really, because if the organizational level are not talking to the strategic level, you've got a disconnect. So we need to have a fundamental written view, written branch review of what we do, why we do it, how we do it, but very, very importantly, what difference we make in doing it. Because if we don't actually educate in terms of that difference, nothing is going to happen. And if we don't inform our strategic decision makers, then we cannot get close to our commissioners. And if we can't get close to commissioners, then there's no money coming. So it's that's where I'm seeing real value in this, elevating the profile of the profession, educating our stakeholders, including our strategic decision makers and our organizational managers, and even our own profession, I hasten to add, because we are a very, very diverse profession. Sometimes I'm not even sure we understand ourselves. So I think it's I'm seeing it as a real opportunity to get us up there in terms of profile, get us up there and educate the people that we need to educate. But I hasten to add, it has to be a rolling year on year on year project. It can't, we have to keep doing it, because if we don't keep doing it, we keep dropping off the radar. So it's very, very, I've been here long enough to know that putting out and launching something works for the month or 2 after you've launched it, but you just need to keep banging the drum, for want of a better way of putting it. And that means just keep going back, keep going back, keep going back, sharpening your elbows, getting to the tables that you need to get to. And that takes a lot of patience, but it also takes a lot of resilience on behalf of the profession. So we just need to keep doing it, because I'm having conversations I was having 20 years ago. So we just so this document will certainly help to inform that.
Yeah, I also feel that the strategic element is one of the ones that I'm placing my store on, because I think then that would influence the agenda in all the other 2 aspects as well. It would be great if occupational therapists could get involved locally in their locality. We have something called a housing needs and demands assessment that every local authority has to do, and then we actually deliver in terms of accessible housing, wheelchair housing, specialist housing, adaptations is all within that. And we don't even have our integrated health and social care partnerships are hardly even getting a look at that to be consulted on that. Some are, but it's very patchy. Our integration is still a work in progress. But I think if we could get in and about that, so there's a number of things, the local housing plan, etc. And I think there are examples around the country where my colleagues have managed to do that, and that's come down to their basic relationship building skills, which we know as OTs is absolutely critical to what we do. So I do think the strategic element is going to be really, really powerful, and I'm really welcome that. I'm really keen to shape that for Scotland, that bit of it. But also, I think, just very briefly, I think for practitioners and for operational staff, that will have an effect on them, but also it's the case studies. It's how other people are doing it. People that know me on this call will know I have a soapbox. One of my soapbox issues is we're not good at sharing good practice, and we need to systemically change from the bottom up the things that are working well as well.
And I think as a project team, we've been really keen. I've mentioned it earlier, is that it is about using those case studies to say that we're already doing this. This is how people are doing it. And those conversations that we're having with practitioners and managers and commissioners about actually how they've been able to do it, so that we can share that good practice and that learning, so that people aren't, who are wanting to make the changes, aren't starting from scratch, and we can use that experience. So, one final question. There will be people sat here or listening in on Tuesday thinking, oh, this sounds really great, does all of this, but actually, how does this apply to me as an occupational therapist? So I'm just going to give you an opportunity to say one kind of message to those occupational therapists that are sat there thinking, this all sounds really great, but actually, what does this mean to me in my day-to-day work? Jill, let's start with you, Jill.
Yeah, I think one sort of practical thing for people is, it's about relationships, really, like I was saying. When I look back on my career, when I've been able to work together with partners across health, social care and housing and others to deliver improvements, it's about building relationships. And I suppose we all know as occupational therapists how important the home is. I mean, the majority of us live in a home, and a lot of our activities take place in a home. So for all occupational therapists, it's something that they need to be in and around. So I suppose my other plea, because I very much wear a housing hat with my housing association colleagues, and I love the housing association movement, and the values that most of them have absolutely align with mine, and they're really useful to us in order to improve the lives of the people that we are working with, because they have other reaches and networks and connections and signposting that can help to support them too. So I suppose it's about that basic thing about, we always want to put the person at the centre. How can we wrap around that person the type of solutions and services that they need that can improve their lives? And working together with our housing colleagues at whatever level we're at is important in that regard, in my view.
Important, Jill. What about yourself? What one message would you want to give, Shane, to those that are sat here this afternoon listening?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that, Jill, because as a frontline practitioner, a lot of this policy and strategy stuff seems so far removed from the reality of practice and the challenges of practice. So it's difficult to make that connection, and there is definitely a disconnect between policy strategy and operational service delivery in Northern Ireland. There's no doubt about that. What I would say, probably as an individual, you'll not make much difference in the immediate term. But what I would say, professionally, we need to be mindful. We need to have a plan, because if we don't have a plan, someone's going to do that for us. Believe me, someone is going to do it for us. So I think I would see that, to frontline practitioners, this is more about the future of the profession and how we're going to look going forward, particularly in the housing space. So it's being patient in terms of, this work needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen, because if it doesn't happen, our impact and our input will be diluted. Certainly, I see that here. So we need to strengthen and build our argument for I'll not be as dramatic as the future of the profession, but effectively it is about the future of the profession. It is about how we're commissioned. It is about how we're going to be viewed. It is about where we fit in the new world that is definitely coming in terms of reformation and transformation. So whilst the frontline staff may feel, oh, it's not going to make a difference. Believe me, in the next 5 to 10 years, it will make a difference, and it will really, really shape what the profession might look like in housing. I firmly believe that, because I do think, as I said earlier, every crisis comes with an opportunity, and we have an opportunity to get our voices heard here. And I'm really, really optimistic that this document and this project will help to do that.
That's great. What a great way to finish the conversation, Shane. A huge thank you. Shane, Jill, brilliant as always. Thank you for sharing your kind of expertise and giving us a bit of insight in terms of things in Northern Ireland and Scotland. So huge thank you.